Good evening and welcome to the January 4th, 2021 regular meeting of Mayor and Council. Happy New Year, everyone. First item on our agenda, as usual, is the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm going to ask Councilmember Sales to lead us in the pledge tonight. Go ahead, Lorianne.
Thank you, Mayor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Lorianne. Next item on our agenda is reflection. And for reflection tonight, before we have our moment of silence, I want to call everyone's attention to the tragic passing of Tommy Raskin, the son of our friend and congressman from the next district over, Jamie Raskin. Thomas Raskin was 25 years old, and while it's painful to lose any loved one, it's especially painful to lose a child. So we send our best heartfelt wishes to the Raskin family and all of their friends. If we could have a moment of silence, please. Thank you all very much. Next item on our agenda is approval of minutes. And tonight we have two sets of minutes before us. The first is from the regular session held on December 7th. What is the pleasure of the council? Rob Wu.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Move approval.
Okay. I'm looking for a hand a second. Mike.
Second.
Okay, I'll call the roll. All in favor say aye, any opposed say nay. Councilmember Stesma.
Aye.
Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
Councilmember Sales.
Aye.
Councilmember Spiegel.
Aye.
And Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Okay, that carries unanimously. Next set of minutes is from the joint work session on December 14th. What is the pleasure of the council? Mike. Mike, you are on mute. Mike, you are still on mute.
Too many buttons here, sorry. I'll move approval of the minutes from the work session on December 14th, 2020.
Great. Neil.
Second.
Okay. I'll call the roll. Councilmember Sesma. Mike, you are still muted.
Am I muted still? Can you?
No, I hear you now.
Okay, I'll move approval.
No, we already moved. We already moved it. This is the
All right.
vote. Aye or nay?
Yes, aye.
Okay. Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
Councilmember Sales.
Aye.
Councilmember Spiegel.
Aye.
And Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Okay, carries unanimously. Next item on our agenda, we are going to invite Carolyn Muller, tech team, if you could bring Carolyn Muller, our Director of Parks, Recreation, and Culture. We are going to talk about the naming of the new city park, the former CPSC site.
There we go.
Welcome, Carolyn.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. Thank you for your time this evening. As you are all well aware, we are in the process of planning for the new city park at the former CPSC site. And in order to select a name for the park, we initiated a park naming campaign this past November. A press release was sent out notifying the public that name suggestions were being sought for the new park. The suggestion period was open for 3 weeks and names were submitted through an online format. Through that, we received over 200 submissions, which the park naming subcommittee, comprised of 4 city staff members, narrowed down to 4 proposed names, 2 of which also have an alternate version of the name included as well. Now, we would like your assistance in selecting the final name from the list of proposed names, which are listed on your packet, page 17, and include Innovation or Innovators Park. And this name highlights the fact that Gaithersburg is a hub for technology and innovation. Defender or Defenders Park, This name references its former use as a Nike Missile Control Center, and it could be dedicated to the civil servants who work to keep our citizens safe, from military and police, fire, and other emergency personnel to NIST and NIH employees. Serenity Park. This park recalls the serenity and sanctuary that is the essence of most of our parks, including this new park. And Exploration Park. This name references the space theme that has been part of the concept of the park, especially the playground, throughout its planning. So at this time, I can answer any questions you may have on the process or the names, or if there are no questions, we would love for you to take a vote on the proposed names.
Thank you, Carolyn. So as I looked at the names, my top name among the four is Serenity Park. And then second would be Exploration, and then third Innovation, and then fourth would be Defender. Defender, just, I get it, and I kind of like the concept, but it just sounds a little too militaristic for me, for my tastes. If I had been adding names, I would have thrown one in there. Like I'd like a Logtown Park, just because that was the first name of Gaithersburg. So maybe not that we have to do this here, but I kind of want to incorporate that name somewhere in the city at some point, because it's got a lot of history here. But so those are my order is Serenity first, Exploration second. Who wants to go next? Neil, and then Rob.
I'm with you. My list was actually exactly the same, in the same order as yours. And as an extra bonus, Serenity happens to be the name of a science fiction movie that I'm particularly fond of. So it works for me on multiple levels. But I think the whole idea of a park, especially this location, which is kind of off the beaten path, Serenity seems to be a good fit.
Thank you, Neil. We'll go to Rob.
Thanks, Mayor. Of the names there, I think Innovation Park and Exploration Park are a little close to Discovery Park. And so I'm not too keen on those. Now, I just want to throw out there, I'm going to stick to my guns on my original preferences for the site. And I think my first preference by far is, should his family being so inclined to dedicate the park to Henry, call it Marafa Park. If his family is not so inclined, I've kind of thrown this out as well. It's not one of the ones on the list, is Veterans Park. We're one of the only major cities in the state that does not have a Veterans Park, including our competitor to the south, Rockville, has a Veterans Park. So I'd throw those two out there. If we are selecting from that list only, I kind of want to go with, I think, Firefly Park, or I'm sorry, Serenity Park, the science fiction. Get it? No, Neil's gone. He would get it.
Thank you, Rob. I actually wanted to, I sort of meant to say, when it comes to innovation or innovators, I agree with that point that it's close to Discovery Park. And if I remember correctly, the Crown neighborhood has like an Innovation Plaza or something with a name that's similar to that. So that's why, because I like the name, but I just feel like I don't want to overdo that here in the city. So who wants to go next? Ryan, go ahead. Ryan, then Lorianne, then Mike.
Thanks, Mayor. I want to start by thanking the staff who were involved in the committee, and recognize that it's a difficult task, and it's good that we engage the public in this process. But that said, I'll offer some constructive feedback to the process. This is not necessarily geared towards the committee, but just to the process in general, is that all of these names, while they can all be good and fine, none of them really lights me up. And that's a challenge. That's a really hard thing to do. We've got a number of parks already. We've used a lot of names. Other jurisdictions have already taken good names, and we can't just go around copycatting everything. But I would suggest that we don't have to make a final decision tonight. I don't know I hope that doesn't throw Carolyn's long-term plans out of whack, but we've got a little time to chew on this. I know we want to be able to make a decision and announcement and market it accordingly, but if it makes sense to the rest of the council to kind of take a little time to chew on this and decide, do we want to go with one of these four? Do we want to consider something else? I think Rob's point is well taken. I actually was very involved many years ago in the effort to name the Rockville Library, the Rockville Memorial Library, in memory of fallen soldiers. But we also just don't, I think we have an opportunity to do something that's just a little less generic. But it's a challenge because you're trying to check a lot of boxes. You want to find something that connects to the place that you're in, the history of that place, the history of the city at large, something that is, sort of noteworthy about maybe the section of the city or the region that you're in. And that is challenging. And while discovery and innovation are certainly things that we're trying to promote, they can be a little bit generic and a little bit similar. I personally did not love Serenity Park because of all the four finalists, that was the one that didn't really have any other significance beyond just sort of having a nice name. At least the other three had sort of an explanation as to how they tied into some of the things that we're trying to do in Gaithersburg. But again, all of that said, if we're going to make a decision tonight, I would probably put Innovation Park at the top of my list, but I agree that it's kind of similar to Discovery Park. But I think we might want to just take a beat and think about whether there's some other names we'd like to consider before we rush to a final decision, if that's okay.
All right, we will. Well, Rob, before we go back to you, we're gonna go to Lorianne and Mike, give everyone a chance to talk, and then we'll come back to you. So Lorianne, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. So thank you, Carolyn, and all of the volunteers that participated in the naming. I too agree that while I like the innovation name, the Serenity Park, I do think that this is an opportunity to make a significant identifier for this park, to create something more significant. We're talking about parks and culture and recreation, and I didn't feel the cultural significance of these names. And while I like the innovation, we just opened, our new park nearby. And so I like the innovation if, I had to choose tonight, but I would agree with Ryan that I would like to see some other names contributed. Serenity Park, when I think about the gardens that are going to be there and the sitting areas and the layout of this new park, all of our parks, I would hope, bring a little serenity to everyone nowadays. And so I would appreciate just a bit more creativity and intention to this park. And I think with having the community involved in the naming and suggesting something a bit more significant, I think we have some more time. I think it would be helpful, so.
All right, thanks, Lorianne. We'll go to Mike.
Okay, I guess my mic is on. If we had to choose tonight, I would probably support Serenity Park. I think Lorianne and Neil have described why, and Judd. That's reasonable, I think. But I do think we have an opportunity here to identify with some historical context for the park that is distinct from a defense coordination site. I'm worried that someone will want to build a wall if we call it Defender Park. So yeah, we can't have that. No building a wall. Anyway, I think that given the fact that we're doing a couple of new things here, there's another opportunity. My attitude about innovation or exploration is that it's just too similar to Discovery Park that we just opened. So I think that we can continue to explore think about other potential identifiers for this. I think, given the location, Serenity makes sense to me in terms of kind of a hidden park there, but and the types of activities that we want there. But I think I'd rather spend a little bit more time, think about if there's some historical significance of the location other than the Nike site that we might be able to associate it with in terms of the community, that I would be in favor of looking at some of those ideas. But I do want to thank the committee and the team that came up with these names. I think that tells us the difficulty when you have 200 suggestions, submissions, that it was difficult to kind of sort these out. I think if these rose to the top, then that seems reasonable, but I think we can still do better than Serenity. So.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, we'll go to Rob and then Lorianne.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to circle back and support Ryan's comment. And so, again, the names that I put forward are two that I'm going to kind of continue pushing. One other one I'd like to push is Parky McParkface. We'll see where that one flies. But seriously, yeah, no, I think this is a good start, but I think we can deliberate on it and come up with something that just fits the community.
Thanks, Rob. Lorianne.
Thank you, Mayor. So I remember Rob mentioned a veterans park, and I know we sometimes have our veterans celebrations at Chrisman Park, which was named after a veteran. So we don't have a veteran park per se, but we definitely did our due diligence in creating some significance in that area. So.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to make that point as well, Lorianne. Veterans, I like the name veterans, but it is kind of generic. And I think what we did with Chrisman Park is actually an improvement on that, because it personalizes it more to a veteran who was of the city of Gaithersburg and who was a hero. And we have our Memorial Day services there every year. It's, I think it's a really special place and serves that purpose, but it's not to say I'm against having another thing called veterans, but I think it's a good point.
Now you're just going to poke the bear, though, that in fact, Chrisman Park is named after a fallen hero. So that's why we do our Memorial Day celebration there. Whereas veterans are folks that did not perish in the line of duty. We actually do have a veterans memorial right outside of City Hall.
We do.
We don't have a veterans park. So.
Yep. All good points. All good points. And also, I do think we should name something for Henry, and I think we're sort of that's sort of on the, I wouldn't even say the back burner. It's sort of on our minds. I'm not sure it'll be a park, but we'll see. But it is on people's minds. So Carolyn,
yes.
What's it may be that you have to give us a deadline. What are our parameters here in terms of taking some time and thinking about this?
Well, I mean, certainly the ball is in your court, Mr. Mayor. We were obviously hoping that we could come to a decision tonight, but I respect all of the, opinions that everyone shared. And, we are open to other suggestions. So it is up to you. When we put together the process, we did originally plan to come to you with a presentation of what we had chosen as the name, but there was, we did get some feedback from council members who wanted to have the final decision making. So we did. So that's part of why we made the process the way that we did. So, if you guys wanted to take some time and think through it, we can revisit this. I can find out from Doris and get on the schedule again and revisit this. And would that work?
Maybe, but you know what? It would be, I think the best thing you could do for this group,
Yes.
this motley crew here, is to say, hey, you know what? Here's our drop dead date. We need a name by X date. If that date is at the meeting 2 weeks from now, so be it.
Okay.
And then, we can sort of take what's on the table. And if anybody wants to add some more things, they can do that and propose them. But we will have a night where we have to make this decision.
Okay.
Mike, I saw your hand go up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think a couple of, there's been some mention of some historical context for the property beyond CPSC or the Nike site. And I think that if staff could do a little bit of research to tell us a little bit about the community surrounding the park, what it was before it was the suburban community is now, what it was before it became the Nike site control center. I think that might be helpful and contribute to and then I think identify the 3 or 4 key elements of this park that make it distinct from all the other parks that we have. And hopefully with those elements that we can come up with something that's more distinctive and unique. This isn't going to be the last park in the city that's going to be named, but I think we have an opportunity here to do something distinctive in identifying some of the unique features here.
Agree. And just to complicate this a little further, I actually like the name Nike Park because it doesn't sound, even though it does reference this defensive missile system, it sounds like it could just be celebrating athletics or something. And this is a primarily athletic park. So anyway,
Here comes the trademark cease and desist letter.
Copyright.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to.
differently. So what? Add a Y to it or something. Do something different with the spelling. Anyway.
They built it on a Nike site. Montgomery Village has a Nike park.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
Yes.
There are quite a few around. I think that was popular for former Nike missile locations. I think there's
can
one in
see
Anne
why.
Arundel
Okay.
County. Yeah.
If it's been done a lot elsewhere, then we'll just scratch that.
I think we
So-
scratched Nike, but I think, let's take a historical perspective here as well as some unique features here.
Well, how about if I put together some additional information to send out to you, and then I'll try to get that to you in the next day or two, and then we can have a decision by 2 weeks from tonight, the 18th.
Carolyn, can I ask, I don't want to make things even more complicated, but I think just as background for those of us who might want to glance at them, would it be okay to get a list of all 200 of the names that were submitted?
I can send that to you. Yes.
Because
All right.
I don't think we want to give short shrift to the fact that there was public input here,
Absolutely not.
So,
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Can I
Okay,
suggest that we go to the first meeting in February?
Would that work, Carolyn? We'll make this decision first meeting February,
Okay. February 1st. Is that?
whenever the first meeting
Yeah.
is. If
Okay.
it's the first, then fine. Okay. Well, then thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate it. Okay, so we're going to move on in our agenda now to
Thank
public
you.
comments. And this is the time when the mayor and council would like to hear from anybody who would like to speak on any topic other than a public hearing topic. And guess what? We have no public hearings. So whatever you want to speak about this evening, we'd be glad to hear. We ask that you keep your remarks to no more than 3 minutes. State your name and address or neighborhood for the record. Tech team, can you play your instructional video, please? Well, that didn't, for whatever reason, okay, here we go.
Good evening. If you've connected to the meeting tonight via Zoom and you're on a desktop or a laptop and you wish to make a public comment, we can't currently see or hear you. What you need to do, please, is wiggle your mouse around and look towards the bottom center of your screen. You should see a raised hand button. Go ahead and click on that now for us, please. Alternatively, if you've connected in via telephone, you can press *9.
All right, thank you, tech team. So I see we have one hand up at the moment. Tech team, if you could bring up Rob Krebs, please. And I'm going to wait till that happens. It looks like Rob is coming up, but is still muted. Rob, when you just unmute yourself and state your name and address or neighborhood, and go right ahead.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Rob Krebs, 7 St. Ives Place, Gaithersburg, Maryland. I just wanted to comment on the joining of the CCOC issue that you'll be discussing later on in your issues. There are literally now more instances of legal battles with the CCOC on the record than the actual
Rob, team, can you pause? Tech team, can you pause this for a sec? Rob, I'm going to let you keep on with this testimony, but I just want to remind you that the record on this matter is closed.
Yes.
So we're not legally allowed to consider anything beyond what's in the record. So you're welcome to testify as you see fit, but just keep that in mind. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So as I said, there are literally more instances of legal battles with the CCOC on the record than there are actual numbers of annual complaints the city has documented as the reason to join the CCOC for mediation services. So at least 10 to 1 constituents are against the proposal, as we're seeing in the public record. And even if the 5,000 homeowners represented by the HOAs are off by an order of magnitude, the city hasn't really documented a need for this over time. No accounting, no measure, no trend has been set. So complaints are not the main focus of this for the city. This is more of a political issue than it has to do more with political calculations and future careers than it has to do with complaint handling in the city. And finally, it raises a tax during COVID, a time when today's mail from the county government is asking who needs help for making rent. I just wanted to express those again. I know that the public record is closed on this issue, but I know that other things have happened since the public record has closed in terms of discussions about cases that the CCOC has before it. And so I wanted to be able to make those comments, and I think that any discussion of it can be helpful. And I'd like to thank you very much for this opportunity to say once again that we'll be looking forward to, we sincerely hope that the council will look to the constituents that it represents and vote in their best interests. And thank you very much for this time.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Tech team, if you could bring up Dina Saunders, please. Dina, once you come up, just unmute yourself, state your name and address or neighborhood, and go right ahead.
Good evening, everybody. Happy New Year. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, first, Happy New Year. I hope everyone had a safe and healthy New Year. My question is, can anything be done about the cars racing up and down Fallbrook, Victory Farm, Teachers Way? We have cars that are just thinking it's like the Indy 500 out there. They are avoiding, they're not stopping at stop signs, especially in my neighborhood in Audubon Square. And it's really, getting to be a hazard. I mean, one of these days, someone is going to come out, not stop, and there's going to be a terrible accident, which God forbid would happen. But we've seen police cars come through, but is there anything that can be done about these cars? I mean, we know where some of them live, and the neighborhood isn't across the development from mine. But I mean, I'm really hating to hear all these cars going up and down the streets. That's really all I had to say, and stay safe, everybody.
Thank you very much, Dina, and Happy New Year to you as well. And as far as the car racing goes, I would suggest that whenever you see it happening, you report it to the police, and you can feel free to follow up with an email to either to our department. I know you know Dan Lane, but if you feel more comfortable going through any member of the council or through me, you're welcome to do that too, and we can follow up with our police chief as well. But the most important thing is that when it's happening, you report it to the police, because a lot of police action and patrolling is dictated by where the reports are coming from. So thanks for that. And I don't see any more hands up at this time. So we will move forward to from the mayor and city council, and we will start with Councilmember Sesma.
Thank you, Mayor, and Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you to those who are watching us online. I hope everybody had a safe and healthy and happy holiday. We're 4 days into 2021. We're 16 days to the inauguration of the 46th president of the United States. I think that'll be confirmed on Wednesday by Congress. So things are looking up. We have vaccines available, except we need a better plan to make sure that everybody is vaccinated. I think we're probably still months away from where we can really let up and feel relatively safe in leaving our homes and circulating in public and in social occasions. So in the meantime, it's important to follow the same guidance we've been following for the last 9 months, which is to wear a mask when you're outside of your home, wear a mask when you're in proximity of friends and neighbors or strangers, when you go shopping or anything else. Wash your hands as often as possible, especially if you touch things outside of your own environment that you have control of, and avoid spending a lot of time inside with a lot of other people. So maintain your social distance. All of those actions are things that you can do yourself to reduce the likelihood and the risk that you'll be exposed to the coronavirus. And then as soon as you have the opportunity to receive the vaccine, to be vaccinated, you should explore that as quickly as you can. So be aware of those things. I'm sure the county health department and the state will be providing guidance on that. So pay attention. The city will probably repeat those announcements and make them known to the public in Gaithersburg as soon as we have that information to share. So anyway, take care of yourselves. That's the most important thing you can do. Where none of those things are political acts, they're all acts to keep yourself and your family safe. So I also want to offer my condolences to the Raskin family on the tragic passing of Thomas Raskin, Tommy, and hope that their pain is, and hope that they're gaining strength from the support of the greater community. I know that the family has received a lot of support already. So also want to offer condolences to City Manager Briley on the passing of her grandfather last week. So we have our condolences as well. I don't have a lot to say. The one thing I do need to talk about is on January 7th, this Thursday, the National League of Cities Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Committee, a group of members of that committee will be meeting with the EPA transition team, the Biden-Harris EPA transition team, to discuss a number of issues. The discussion will focus on water infrastructure, and that means a lot of different things, but we'll also be talking about racial equity and environmental justice, and climate change mitigation, adaptation, community resilience, and sustainability. So that's some of the things. It'll be an opportunity for cities of various sizes to talk about water infrastructure issues and other environmental issues with the incoming team, to find out what the Biden administration priorities are for the environment and infrastructure, and then explain how, or discuss how, the National League of Cities and its member cities, including Gaithersburg, can contribute to those achieving those priorities, and making sure that municipal governments, state and local governments, are able to benefit from any stimulus coming forward. So that's about all I have for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. We will go to Lorianne.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. Just want to reiterate, Happy New Year to everyone. Welcome back. I know that when we left off at the end of the year, we had just awarded our first Gaithersburg Emergency Grant, the GEM Award. And so I want our local businesses to know that that award is, the applications are still open. And so please take advantage of it and apply. You can find out more information on our economic development website with our toolbox grants as well. I also wanted to thank all of our food distribution hubs that are still working around the clock to feed our families who are experiencing food insecurity during these difficult times. I would also like to remind everyone about the District 17 legislative session. The Maryland General Assembly starts on January 13th, and the District 17 delegation, they are holding an event this coming Sunday. And so you can learn more about that on any of our representatives' websites. So that's happening this Sunday evening. And Mike mentioned Tommy Raskins, who passed away, and there is a memorial fund for anyone who wants to support the Raskin family during this difficult time. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Lori Ann. We will go to Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. Happy New Year, everyone. I'll reiterate the condolences that have been offered, and just to add, to quote Hamilton, there's nothing more unimaginable than having to deal with the loss of a child. So I also want to offer my personal heartfelt sympathies to the Raskin family. We received an email from one of our constituents about trash collection, and I just wanted to raise that issue for possible future discussion among the council. This was in the neighborhood of West Riding, where they do not have an HOA, as Mike knows, and there's been some debate about which vendors trash pickup and how many days a week they should come and which days. And so a constituent has asked us to consider ways to support potentially coordinating or unifying those efforts. We may decide that's not something that the city wants to get involved in, but I thought it was at least worth raising for something we might want to discuss down the road, because obviously, as people should know by now, trash collection is not something that's handled by the city, and each community privately contracts for their trash service and different levels of service and different costs. And on another note, since we are going to be discussing and presumably voting on ethics legislation tonight, perhaps it's fitting that I raise a sort of somewhat related issue of concern about ethics, proper behavior of elected officials. Some of you may have seen the news coming out of the city of Frederick last week regarding allegations of sexual harassment and mistreatment of city employees by an elected official. And whether that's true or not, they're just allegations at this point. It got me thinking about one important aspect, because the news coverage noted there really isn't any formal mechanism for addressing that kind of behavior by elected officials in Frederick, other than perhaps criminal charges. And I started thinking about what, if any, mechanisms we have under our laws here in Gaithersburg if, God forbid, an elected official were determined to be engaged in or were accused of that kind of misconduct, whether it's quid pro quo or hostile workplace, misconduct or otherwise. We do have a recall election process in our charter, but that is a very high bar and obviously relies on members of the public and voters to kind of spearhead it. So aside from recall elections and criminal prosecutions, which state law indicates do have certain effects on the ability of a local official to maintain their position, I was wondering how local elected officials might otherwise be held accountable for serious misconduct that doesn't rise to the level of a criminal prosecution. What rules might there be? What would be allowed? What would be appropriate without overreaching or without finding someone liable or responsible before they've been given due process? We have a lot of laws and rules about financial conflicts of interests and campaign reporting, but we don't really seem to have any formal processes for dealing with other forms of misconduct like that. I asked our staff to start doing a little bit of preliminary research if they were willing to see what other jurisdictions might do about this, what bodies would have jurisdiction to investigate or adjudicate allegations against an elected official while remaining sufficiently independent, and what other types of consequences there might be, sanctions, fines, removal from office, things. I'd like to sort of poll the mayor and council and see if there is sufficient consensus to support having staff look into this matter a little bit further, see what other municipalities do, what might be a workable or appropriate policy recommendation or regulation to ensure better accountability for elected officials in the future, while still ensuring due process and avoiding frivolous or retaliatory complaints against elected officials, which is also a serious risk. I've got a couple more items on my from the mayor and council, but Mr. Mayor, I don't know if you want me to take a break at this point.
Yeah. So first off, you thoughtfully copied me on that note to staff and had shared the story of it's a Frederick council member, right? And if I remember correctly, and I agreed. And so, while I'm interested, you guys could raise your hands if you want. I'm the mayor. I set the agenda. I'm already on board with exploring how other jurisdictions do this, and I agree it'd have to be a really special, egregious case of sustained, or substantiated, whatever the word is, proven misconduct by an elected official. But I agree the charter should have some sort of outlet for a situation like that, and it doesn't. And the recall requiring 20% of the registered voters is just not a practical thing. So I agree that this is something we should take a look at. And I was actually it actually came up at the agenda meeting this morning. Lynn has already requested information from MML, and we're looking to at some point get this on an agenda to discuss and take a look at the issue. So it's coming up. You can go ahead with your comments, and then Mike actually texted me because he wanted to say something about the collective trash pickup. So we'll get to him after you're done with your comments.
Thanks, Mayor. I just had one other thing I wanted to mention. The Presidential Inaugural Committee has reached out to some municipal representatives to let them know that as part of the inauguration programs, they're planning a memorial tribute to victims of COVID across the country, and asking local partners, including municipalities who might be interested, to join either in illuminating buildings or doing some other kind of symbolic ceremony on the night of January 19th in a national moment of unity and remembrance. And I just wanted to suggest that I thought that might be something that would be appropriate for Gaithersburg to join in. The Presidential Inaugural Committee is a nonpartisan organization, and they're the ones responsible for planning the various activities around the inauguration and the inauguration itself. And this was something that they had put out there and proposed and are going to be doing. And I just thought it was a nice opportunity for a city like ours to participate in that kind of a memorial. They
Agreed.
also-
And staff is looking into that, the best way we can commemorate
Great. They're also
our
doing a
tribute to
national,
the victims of COVID.
yeah, they're also doing a National Day of Service, but we already do that, and we might be able to share some links maybe through their committee if they're compiling some sort of clearinghouse of municipalities around the country who are doing different programs. But it was the memorial tribute piece that I thought was something different that we don't already do. So
Cool. So was that it, or do you have more, Ryan?
that's
before
it
we
for
go to
me
Mike
this
and
evening, Mr. Mayor.
his-
Thank you very
his
much.
rebuttal? Okay, Mike, real quick, and then we'll go to Neil and then Rob.
Okay, well, look, so the issue of the trash pickup in West Riding came up. I guess a lot of people don't really know how neighborhoods that don't have an HOA handle this. And basically each homeowner has their own, has the ability to hire their own trash service from among probably about 6 or 7 operators in the county. A few years back, at least once or twice, I've suggested that we might want to talk about ways that we might regulate trash hauling services in the city, either by licensing the haulers so that they would have to comply to our rules and regulations in terms of time and speed and pickup and service, et cetera. The individual who wrote the letter to us suggested that the city should just identify a hauler that would be the official hauler that would be eligible to contract with various communities. But I think it would still come down to individual households doing that in non-HOA communities. So I think this is something that we should talk about. I don't have any problem doing that. Certainly this came up about probably 6 or 7 years ago, and the Citizens Assembly, which is an informal type of organization within West Riding, managed to negotiate a few rates with 2 or 3 different haulers, and that's who most people use. But I think, and that was partly in response to a major increase in fees from waste management. So people wanted reasonable alternatives. Now people want friendly service as well, and that seems entirely reasonable. But I support Ryan's suggestion that we should talk about ways that we might be able to do this. Previously, when we talked about doing trash hauling or regulating that, there was a lot of resistance from various neighborhoods about us doing that. So anyway.
Thank you, Mike. We'll
like
go,
some other discussions we've had on other topics.
maybe, Tanisha, maybe we can get some sort of feedback from Kevin Roman on this matter at some point.
Yes, happy to follow up, Mayor.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Neil.
All right, I'm going to keep it very brief. First of all, I do want to echo the condolences to the Raskin family and to you, Tanisha, on your loss as well. It's tough having to deal with that sort of thing at any time, especially over the holidays. So on a brighter note, hopefully everybody had a great holiday season, Christmas, New Year's, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever you might celebrate. Hopefully it was a good one, despite the challenging circumstances. I know my family gatherings were much more virtual than usual. I'd like to just chime in on one point regarding the trash pickup in West Riding that just came up. Mike, I have a question. I don't know if this is controversial or not, but isn't that what HOAs are for? Wouldn't there be, if the community really believes that it should have unified trash service, couldn't it form an HOA just with a limited jurisdiction over collecting money for trash pickup? That would seem to like a construct that is already widely used for that sort of thing and solves the problem without having to get the municipal authorities involved. So just
Well, I think that's
been thrown on the table.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the issues. We don't, I don't know how you establish an HOA if it's not part of the original covenants of the community.
There's probably a lawyer or two in the room that would have some ideas.
Yes, and there's probably also residents who would be particularly opposed and in fact would prefer to live in a non-HOA community. So that's
I
happened.
understand, and that's why I suggested that it might be controversial, but it would, if people.
That's why I raised it, and that was part of the controversy that we dealt with before. And I think we just need to have a discussion about it. So about various options. There are other things that we might do.
All right, I wish you luck.
Yeah.
That's it for me tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. We'll go to Rob.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to wish everyone a happy new year, and also echo the condolences expressed both to the Raskin family and to you, Tanisha, as well.
And I will echo those condolences, Tanisha. Obviously I covered the Raskin family at the beginning of this meeting, but not you. And certainly we're thinking about you and your family over this holiday. So just an announcement, the next regular, or I should say next week, which is January 11th, next Monday, we will have a work session on our stormwater program fee reassessment. And just like this meeting and all of our meetings over the last few months, it will be on Zoom. You can either join the Zoom through the city's GaithersburgMD.gov/virtual page, or you can watch us on YouTube or wherever we're streaming these Zooms. And then the next regular meeting of the Mayor Council will be on Tuesday, January 19th. Note that is a Tuesday because January 18th is the Martin Luther King holiday. So we will be meeting on that Tuesday. And with that, we will go to from the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you all for your expressions of support and condolences. And it's an interesting time to be trying to put together a socially distanced, safe celebration of life. But my grandfather did live till 90, and we are at peace and are happy that he's at peace. So thank you for that. And Happy New Year to everyone. The SOT notes that went out last, we talked about this quote that came out. I forget who said it. I think it was someone in Congress that, there's light at the end of the tunnel as with respect to COVID-19, but we still need to get through the tunnel. And so as we get through the tunnel, I just wanted to remind the community that city services for in-person service is currently by appointment only. And so we want to encourage you to check our website so that you can make your appointment before headed out to City Hall or the Activity Center or wherever else you might want to have in-person service from the city. It's all appointment only through the end of January. And we will reassess, but unfortunately our numbers are still climbing right now, and we hope we're able to get our community spread under control, and we're able to reopen some walk-in services for the community. There is still testing going on, so just a quick reminder that there's still outdoor testing happening at Lake Forest Mall. The county is not conducting that testing. It's actually through the Latino Health Initiative, and that's on Mondays. And starting January 15th and alternating Fridays beginning January 15th, the county will be conducting indoor testing at, I'm sorry, it's at Casey Community, at the Casey Center. So we want to encourage you to make sure that you are following all of the protocols. If you are experiencing symptoms, to continue to follow those protocols and avoid contact with people, and make sure that you take advantage of testing while we all wait in line and wait our turn to evaluate whether the vaccine is appropriate. I strongly encourage it if it's the right thing for you to do. And I hope that you all will consult with your physician before making a decision. We're excited that our first responders are included in the first phase of the vaccine. So as distribution continues through this first phase, our police officers will be in line, and we think that that could happen here in January. So looking forward to that. We ended the year with just an amazing outpouring of support from this community for about 930 families for our holiday giving program. So we were able to support over 900 families, which included over 2,000 children. in our community who were able to receive gift cards and small gifts for the holiday season. And I just want to say again, thank you to the community for their generous support. We did get a very sizable anonymous generous donation, as Mayor Ashman pointed out at our last mayor and council meeting. And we'll be working with the community partners to do a coat drive and some other distribution and support activities for the community this month. So stay tuned for more information there. And I just want to announce that the budget survey is now open and available to the public. It is on the city's website. We really would love to hear from you about your priorities, and we use that information to help develop our budget that gets presented to the mayor and council for consideration. So the survey is open now. It opened today, and it will remain open through the end of the month. And we encourage you to respond and tell your neighbors and your family members to respond in the household. We really love to hear from everyone in the community, and we are hoping for a diverse response. We are asking some demographic questions this year so that we can get a better idea for geographic diversity and race and ethnic diversity in our community and the response rate. So we're going to be doing a little more targeted work to try to get some more responses representative of the community, and look forward to presenting those results to you all during the budget process. And with that, I will again say thank you for your support, and I will be following the rules as I return from Ohio and quarantining and setting the example. So I'll see you on Zoom.
Thank you, Tanisha. Next on our agenda is our economic development update. Tech team, if you bring up Tom Lonergan, that would be great. There he is. Welcome, Tom.
You are, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. Just one thing for you all tonight, Judd. Over the past 9 years, I have typically used the first meeting of the new year to provide a pretty detailed update on the status of the city's office and retail markets. We've been doing that, frankly, since the end of the Great Recession. And after that time, Gaithersburg's numbers had almost always and reliably trended in the right direction. That was until this past year, when COVID caused our vacancy rates at office and retail centers to rise, not as precipitously as in other markets, but increased nonetheless. And while the economic fallout and systemic changes brought on by the pandemic continues to shock the hotel and retail industries and wreak havoc on our office market, our position as a biotechnology hub does have the potential to gain strength. I did want to highlight a quote from Katie Burke, a researcher with the commercial real estate analytics company CoStar, in a story she recently wrote on trends that are likely to continue beyond 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic has driven historic gains in the biotech sector, pushing fast-growing companies to gobble up space and drive most of the leasing activity from markets across the country. Throughout 2020, rents for lab space rose, vacancies plunged, and employment figures climbed. The phenomena inspired big names developers such as Boston Properties to say they would pivot office development plans into new life science projects as leasing from most office users dwindles. And according to a recent report from brokerage firm CBRE, about 14 million square feet of lab space is currently under construction nationally, but demand among biotech tenants outpaces what's in the pipeline by almost 2 million square feet. Now, markets where demand outpaces inventory are not restricted to Boston and San Francisco. The issue exists right here in our own backyard. According to our friends at Shear Partners, a local leading expert in the life science real estate market, supply in our corridor remains the biggest issue. The life sciences industry was called out during our recent conversation as a singular bright spot in the suburban Maryland market. Shear saw demand for space for biotech companies growing in the fourth quarter of 2020 and additional demand already building in the early days of this year. Currently, there is less than 1% availability rate for lab space in Gaithersburg, compared to 5% in Rockville. More than a dozen potential users are currently actively in the market in search of new or expanded space, and 4 of those users are in the hunt for 50,000 square feet of space or more. There is a demand of about 600,000 square feet of space currently in our market, of which about half will need to be newly delivered in order to be accommodated. Demand for manufacturing space was identified as being particularly acute. It's their belief that the only thing that could stagnate our growth in our market will be due to lack of opportunity, meaning space, for companies looking to relocate or expand. Too much demand is hardly a bad problem to have, but not one which we can ignore. With a goal established by the biohealth capital region to make us a top 3 biotech market by 2023, it's imperative for us to do all we can to help achieve that goal and further solidify the city's eminence as the epicenter of that market. We in economic development, of course, look forward to working with you this year and beyond towards that end. Thank you, Judd. That's all I've got, and Happy New Year.
Thank you, Tom. Happy New Year to you. Appreciate the report. We're certainly seeing evidence in the city of what you're reporting. And hopefully the biotech demand will continue, and hopefully demand in other sectors will come back. So
Agreed.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to move on to policy discussions. Tech team, if you could bring up Kevin Roman from Neighborhood Services, Mark Fine from the CCOC, and Tim Getzinger from the county's Department of Housing and Community Affairs. That'd be great. We're going to go into our policy discussion on the CCOC and whether or not we're going to opt in the city to this this function. And by CCOC, I'll just remind everybody, it refers to the Commission on Common Ownership Communities. It's a mouth, like, it doesn't, for whatever reason, I get stuck on that acronym. It just doesn't flow the way I want it to flow, but that is what it is. So Kevin, go right ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Happy New Year to everybody. I'm going to give you a little bit of background and then a staff recommendation, and then we'll move on to discussion. So back on October 19th, 2020, the Mayor and Council voted to introduce an ordinance to amend 2-6 of the City Code entitled Exemptions from Montgomery County Legislation and Regulation within the city to include Chapter 10B of the Montgomery County Code entitled Common Ownership Communities as applicable to and within the city. The intent of the code is to promote an equitable balance between the powers of community governing bodies, owners, and residents. As currently, the only recourse for dispute resolution is informal mediation and or to seek relief through the courts, which we know can be timely and costly, especially in this current climate. If the ordinance is adopted, it would provide residents and the governing bodies of the common ownership communities in the city access to services provided by the Montgomery County CCOC's program. Services include educational programs, technical assistance to the board of directors and association members, regulation of elections, budget adoptions, and enforcement procedures. It also provides a program to resolve disputes, which includes mediations and legal binding hearings. Registration would be mandatory for all our associations, and we have over 90 of them. And it includes certain training for members of governing bodies and an annual fee of $5 per unit in each association. And again, that is an annual $5 fee. Again, we have approximately 14,000 dwelling units in our common ownership communities. Collectively, it would cost the city associations around about $70,000 to participate. The Mayor and Council held a public hearing regarding the ordinance on November 16th. During the hearing, 19 members of the public commented on the ordinance, 11 spoke in favor and 8 against. The public record was held open until 5 p.m. on December 11th. We did receive an additional 97 additional submissions that were submitted. And after subtracting some of the duplicate entries as individuals sent more than one submission, we came up with 38 responses were against opting into the CCOC and 43 were in favor of joining the CCOC. Now, taking a deeper dive into the against responses, 63% came from residents and board of directors from 2 communities. Another 30% were received from property managers and board of directors from an additional 7 communities. Now, as for those in favor, 80% of the responses came from 3 communities. And one of those communities is an umbrella community that has several condo associations under that umbrella of the main association. And mostly they were from residents, but also we had a few board of directors respond in favor as well. And another 16 of the responses came from 5 additional communities. Overall, basically, it's an even split. It's what we've experienced in the past. And while we received many comments stating the pros and cons of opting into the CCOC, some of those comments were accurate and some not so much. That said, one speaker during the public hearing, I believe, really hit the mark as he shared firsthand experience with the CCOC. He currently resides in Saybrook, but was previously a condominium board member in the county and had been part of several hearings with the CCOC. At the hearing, he expressed satisfaction with the dispute resolution process and the protections provided to the HOA and also the residents, and also commented on the reasonable outcomes decided by the board. He spoke highly of the educational trainings, especially for new board members, and technical assistance provided to the board members and the association general members. And he summed it up as basically it's a valuable resource for information and training, and also a layer of protection if needed. And that's how we see it. We see it as insurance. If the unforeseen problem arises, like when you're driving your car, nobody likes to pay car insurance, but after you have an accident, you're sure glad you paid that insurance bill. Yes, the fee will sting a bit, but people are resilient, and the pandemic will not last forever. We will recover. And for comparison purposes, the $5 fee, it's a good cup of coffee once a year, and everybody deserves a good cup of coffee. Therefore, to provide an affordable alternative rather than the courts and have access to other benefits provided by the CCOC, your neighborhood services staff support opting into the CCOC, even if we initially need to add a sunset period to the code so we can revisit the progress if needed. This is something that our neighbors to the south did when they opted in, B. Rockville, when they opted in 2010. They did have a sunset period until 2015. And then after some review, they decided to opt back into the program in the fall of 2015. That way we can test drive it and to see if we like it. With that, I will turn it back over to the mayor and council for discussion.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Appreciate all that you've given to us in this process, and same with you, Mark and Tim. Kevin, I know it's come up sort of internally, the question of what essentially is the difference between the Landlord Tenant Affairs Committee, their role, and the type of person that would serve on that, versus the CCOC, their role, and the type of person that would serve on that. Can you, for the public, can you sort of reiterate?
Sure, I'll do my best. While they serve similar functions, they're 2 different boards. So with the landlord tenant, we enforce the landlord tenant codes. The members of that board of the landlord tenant committees would be from rental property owners, also the public at large, and also tenants. Those are the 3 positions held on the landlord tenant commission. For the CCOC board, I believe they have owners that must reside within a common ownership community, and also attorneys or property managers and or architects or developers that are involved in the development process. Mark, did you want to add anything on to the members for the CCOC commission?
You pretty much have it, Kevin. It's okay. 8 members are residents. They have to be residing in a common ownership community. All of them have either been a board member of some type, and then professionals are either architects, building engineers, property management, lawyers, real estate agents, that type of thing. And we
Thank you.
served 3 years with a renewal for possible 3 more.
Thank you both. So as a courtesy to my colleague Ryan Spiegel, who has been the champion of this, I'm going to let him really have the first crack at policy discussion here. Go ahead, Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I want to apologize in advance to my colleagues. I have a lot to say about this, so get comfortable. First, I want to thank Kevin and the Neighborhood Services staff for all their work on this. I think we all know that they are truly experts in dealing with our neighborhoods and their needs and their best interests, and sometimes even telling certain members of our neighborhoods what they need to hear, even if they don't want to hear it. And I think we should place a lot of value in the staff recommendation on this one. As the mayor said, and as you all know, I have long been an advocate for joining the CCOC as a valuable service to assist our HOA boards and our individual homeowners with important training to better govern their communities responsibly and in compliance with the laws, with experts to consult, and with mediation and arbitration services to help resolve disputes efficiently, cheaply, quickly, and fairly. And I should also note, by the way, that when I use the term HOAs, I also mean condo associations, and I'm just using HOAs as a shorthand for all common ownership communities. I want to thank all the folks in several different neighborhoods throughout the city who spoke and emailed in support of joining. Even some board members expressed support for joining, as Kevin mentioned. And I hope my colleagues did carefully review all the correspondence in the record. The suggestions of a few people, it was not lopsided or one-sided. There was definitely a good mix of people who support joining. But I think it's important to respond respectfully on the merits to the criticisms and objections and misunderstandings that we've heard from some people who oppose the CCOC. And first off, in response to a comment we heard tonight, even though I know the record is already closed, I want to say that I reject entirely the suggestion that support for the CCOC is some sort of politically opportunistic maneuver, and I frankly take offense to it. I've been pursuing this issue for years because I believe wholeheartedly it is the right thing to do on the merits. It would be politically much easier to just sit on our hands and wallow in the status quo. We have seen and we have said during many important debates in recent years that supporting a change that draws the ire of certain organized groups is not something we do for our political benefit. Quite to the contrary, when we support such an idea, notwithstanding that ire, there really can be only one reason to, and that's because we think it's the right thing to do. You might take as an example our discussion of the Kelly Park site. But back to the CCOC, joining will not change the internal operations or the internal dispute resolution processes for homeowners associations, unless your procedures happen to be in violation of law. And CCOC mediation and arbitration services are only used if needed. The $5 fee per unit per year is admittedly an additional expense, but a relatively inexpensive insurance policy for the residents, especially when we consider that homeowners pay between $800 plus all the way to maybe $1,500 plus per year in HOA dues and condo fees, plus thousands of dollars in property taxes, plus hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in homeowners insurance. For most homeowners, their home is by far their most valuable asset. And I think $5 is not too much to protect your rights to that asset. Now, the campaigns of a handful of property management companies and boards of directors need to be placed in context. They are, of course, entitled to appropriately advocate for their views, and we have welcomed and carefully reviewed their arguments. But when a board takes advantage of an existing email distribution list to push out a very one-sided or inaccurate view of an issue, and then urges all its residents to sign a form letter, we ought to weigh that input accordingly. nor should we assume that just because a board submits certain views, that those views are truly on behalf of all the members and residents of the community. We certainly saw examples where certain homeowners in a community disagreed with a board president or a board officer from their community on this issue when we took testimony. It's the same with council members. My opinion doesn't necessarily represent the opinion of every citizen, even though I'm elected to represent them all. So I think we need to keep that in context and in mind when presidents of HOA boards say that they are speaking for an entire community. It's understandable that boards might be hesitant or concerned about the impacts of this, but as policymakers trying to do what's best in the broadest possible sense for our residents, we have to balance the impacts on about 90 boards with the benefits to 14,000 plus homeowners and residents in our city, and way more than 14,000 if you consider that there's often more than one owner to a unit and certainly more than one resident for many residential units. And there are a number of inaccuracies that have been repeated by some folks. It is not true that any homeowner would have to pay double fees if their unit is part of more than one HOA entity. It is not true that courts have regularly criticized the CCOC. In fact, court decisions reversing the CCOC have been extremely rare. And the only two court cases cited by opponents are really far less relevant than suggested for a number of reasons that I won't bore everyone with, and I've already communicated to my colleagues on the council. But if you want to see my detailed review of those two cases, let me know. But meanwhile, hundreds of cases and decisions were not appealed to the courts and resolved disputes between HOAs and homeowners successfully. It is not true that the CCOC's mediation and arbitration services create a net added cost. Rather, the fee to commence that process is much cheaper than the fee to file a lawsuit, not to mention the savings from not having to undertake complicated and lengthy formal litigation process. You use the CCOC forum instead. It is not true that an HOA would be required to have them in CCOC proceedings. However, HOA is required to have a lawyer for a court case, so they'd actually save money. It is not true that the CCOC can just hike up the fee whenever they want. Any proposed increase would be subject to the public notice and hearing process and a vote county council members who are accountable to all of us as residents of Montgomery County. It is not true that a dispute immediately heads straight to arbitration. The reality is that the CCOC process includes several preliminary steps to try to resolve a dispute informally and then formally before ever getting to the point of an arbitration hearing. And many of these matters are, in fact, successfully resolved at the preliminary stages. Respectfully, I also find it unpersuasive that a few HOA board members who have never dealt with the CCOC speak so confidently about its alleged shortcomings. Those who have actually dealt with the CCOC, including the testimony that Kevin went over with us earlier tonight, when they were residents of other parts of the county, have generally spoken positively about it in the testimony. We shouldn't let fears or unsupported accusations prevent us from moving forward with a service that can support and benefit so many people. There are also plenty of checks and balances and other safeguards built into the CCOC. For example, parties can elect to go straight into court if they agree that they don't want to use the mediation services, or they can still appeal a decision they disagree with and proceed to court. And as I mentioned before, there can be no increase in the annual fee unless the elected county council holds public hearings and votes to approve a fee increase. Nor do I think it makes sense for us to try to reinvent the wheel by creating a completely new city version of a CCOC when there's already an operating agency with accumulated expertise and resources, and our residents can take advantage of that established system and the economies of scale that come with it. To those who worry that we're somehow giving up our autonomy, there are many areas of law in which we defer to the county, including our recent decision to apply the county's pesticide laws in the city, with the county conducting the enforcement, in lieu of trying to create our own separate regulatory system when a reasonable one and an inexpensive one. I am confident that setting up our own independent CCOC would actually end up being more expensive, especially when considering not only the direct costs, but all the time and effort needed to stand up a new commission, to recruit and train qualified commissioners and mediators and arbitrators, to have dedicated staff to that commission, all of which the county CCOC already has, the operating costs annually. And creating our own city version would not resolve many of the concerns that opponents of the county CCOC have already expressed. Those arguments would theoretically apply equally to a commission, whether it's at the county or city level. It's also worth noting that the substantive law governing HOAs is state law. So it's not as though a city commission would be applying any different law than a county commission here. Nor could we simply expand our existing landlord-tenant commission into some melded Uber commission that handles both rental and HOA issues. As Kevin explained already, that would be unworkable, and I think existentially disruptive to the tenant commission, forcing together different stakeholders with totally unrelated interests and experiences. Would we have HOA representatives appointed to a commission that's adjudicating tenant disputes? Would we have tenant representatives adjudicating homeowner disputes? Not to mention the laws governing rental properties and the laws governing HOAs are completely different. For those who might argue that we never chose to join the CCOC previously in all the years that it has existed, that to me is not evidence that we ever made a decision not to. Bear in mind that the landscape has changed dramatically in recent years in terms of the explosive growth of HOAs in Gaithersburg. The need may not have seemed as great in the past, but now we have roughly half of our housing units in HOAs and condo associations. By contrast, we've always had rental properties, so it made sense to have a landlord-tenant commission to address them. And now it makes sense to join the CCOC. In fact, the very existence of our landlord-tenant commission makes the case for a quasi-judicial local agency to help resolve housing disputes. I don't think we ever hear anyone complaining that the landlord-tenant commission is an extra layer of bureaucracy for landlords and tenants. In anticipation of the additional concern that it would be somehow inconsistent to handle landlord-tenant issues with our own city commission, but to send HOA issues to a county commission, I respectfully say that laws and programs don't always line up in a sort of neat philosophical. Policymaking is iterative and programs evolve. So, for example, we sometimes end up with programs that handle one type of service differently than another. We run the Wells Robertson House as an internal city-operated program, but we outsource other social services to our nonprofit partners. We regulate certain environmental laws ourselves, but when it comes to pesticides, as I mentioned before, we chose to adopt the county law and let the county enforce it within our borders. They don't need to be exactly the same. How these things evolve is a matter of history and practicality. I don't know why the city chose long ago to create a landlord-tenant commission of its own. And while I would certainly support further research and discussion about the long-term future of our landlord-tenant commission and how it's funded, I don't think that issue should hold up our decision to give homeowners and HOA boards access to the services of the CCOC. They are distinct issues. And look, if it turns out after a year or two that there's a mighty hue and cry from the public about how awful it is to deal with the CCOC and it becomes clear that it's not good for Gaithersburg, we can always choose to revisit this and decide to have the city leave the CCOC. Or as Kevin suggested, we might consider a sunset provision and do it as a pilot for a year or two with the option to renew our membership. And to mitigate the financial impact of the additional $5 per year, I propose we amend the draft ordinance to take effect on July 1st of 2021, giving a grace period of 6 months before any fees take effect, during which time boards can have the time to make arrangements for the transition, and hopefully the economy can recover some more. It also has the added benefit of aligning our membership in the CCOC with our fiscal year. Some say this is a bad time to be imposing this fee of $5 per year. But again, I would include a grace period. But I would also argue that this is exactly the right time to be joining the CCOC at a time when people are struggling with housing and finances and are vulnerable to being taken advantage of and need all the help they can get. This program will give our 14,000 plus homeowners in HOA communities more equity in the balance of power between boards and homeowners. When times are tough and budgets are tight, the CCOC can help protect homeowners against unfair fees and fines imposed by their HOAs. And it can also help the HOA itself protect their powers to impose appropriate fees and fines. And it can help boards save money on lawyers whose fees, I might add, are ultimately paid by the dues from the homeowners themselves, which is a particularly stark inequity when you're being forced to cover the bill for the lawyers who may be opposing you in a dispute. The CCOC is essentially a significant consumer protection initiative and a good governance initiative for HOA communities, which comprise over half the housing in our city. For boards that are doing things right, the CCOC won't prevent you from continuing. Just like consumer protection and good governance laws don't prevent good businesses from operating, but it can provide those well-oiled boards with added support. But for those communities where HOAs may not be operating appropriately or not following rules and laws, the CCOC is there to help all parties improve the situation. It's essentially an extremely inexpensive insurance policy, as Kevin said, to protect against abuses while also providing tangible benefits to both boards and homeowners. It's a win-win. What else do boards get? Well, just as homeowners get access to consult with the CCOC's experts and access to cheaper, faster, more streamlined dispute resolution, boards get that too. Remember that the CCOC also rules in favor of boards quite a bit, and they can avoid the added cost of hiring a lawyer, unless they really want to, and the many other expenses of courthouse litigation. They get resources and expertise of CCOC staff that they can call on whenever the board needs it, to help ensure that its decisions are insulated from challenges, to help make sure their meetings and notices and other actions are defensible, and to help them update bylaws to ensure compliance with law. They also get quality training to help them do their jobs. Some people have said you can just use the Community Association Institute for training instead. But the CAI is a private organization and has very limited free resources. In fact, only 3 summary documents are free, and none of its materials are specific to Maryland law, unlike the CCOC's trainings. Access to the CAI's research library and other resources requires a paid membership. And memberships to CAI for HOA board members is $250 annually. CAI offers a board leader certificate for board members who've completed a board training course, but the fee is $199 for non-members and $99 for CAI members. And each member would have to pay the fee individually. Now, tellingly, a search of CAI's public board leader certificate directory reveals no Gaithersburg board members who have earned the certificate, 0. And only 13 people from throughout the entire state of Maryland who earned the certificate. So the notion that board members can simply voluntarily take CAI training in lieu of the CCOC's training standards, frankly, rings hollow to me. Obviously, board members are currently not incentivized to do it. And CAI's fees to take the training means that even if they're already CAI members, a board of, say, 5 people would cost $500 to take the CAI training, the equivalent of 100 homes paying the annual $5 fee to the CCOC, without any of the other resources and services offered by the CCOC. And if the HOA board are not members of CAI, the cost would be double, equal to the annual CCOC fee for 200 homes. It's also worth noting that when boards have the ability to resolve disputes or address issues more efficiently, it ends up saving all of the homeowners in that community, because everyone's HOA dues pay for the activities and decisions of the board. As I said, member dues pay for the board to litigate against the HOA members, including that cost of hiring lawyers. In fact, the CCOC can help to mitigate that concern that a homeowner is paying double for the cost of a dispute because she's paying her own costs to challenge an HOA decision, but also through her dues paying for the HOA opposing her with its efforts, a situation which, as I said before, can often be highly inequitable. There is a possibility to reduce those expenses through the CCOC and maybe even allow for net reductions in overall HOA spending as a result. So HOAs can then decide whether to reduce dues or reallocate saved resources to other priorities. Look, I don't minimize the fact that the CCOC would require an additional expense on homeowners and an additional element for HOA budgets. Any increase, no matter how small, should be taken seriously, especially in these times. But where the cost-benefit analysis of $5 a year increase results in significant added value and protections, which can save both the HOA and its members much more than $5 a year and offset that fee, particularly when considered relative to the overall cost of the annual dues and the other budget line items and the other insurance that we talked about, it's a net benefit. And I ask folks to try to see the big picture upside. Economic conditions continue to cause people to struggle. There may well be an increase in demand for these services in the coming months as issues arise or increase in HOA communities. Alternatively, even though our economy is struggling, home values actually happen to be strong and growing at the moment. There may be an increased need for these services as more owners invest or leverage their equity to renovate or replace decks or build additions, much of which will be subject to HOA approval. So the need for these services among our own city residents may well become all the more pronounced in the coming year. And $5 a year ought to be considered in the context of that overall asset value and growth in equity of homes for owners, something that renters obviously don't experience, not to mention the new federal and state protections for homeowners against foreclosure. As for the suggestion that we could just pay for our own city commission out of our general fund, that may appear at first to save homeowners from having to pay the $5 and is not the most responsible way forward. It will force us to divert city revenues from other priorities. The benefit of a fee-based program is that the revenues are dedicated and cannot be used to plug holes elsewhere in the budget, but also that impacts to general fund revenues as economies rise and fall will not impact the ability to provide fee-based service. So the CCOC is largely immune from budget cut discussions at the county level. And that's why the argument that county budget pain that we're now will force them to raise the CCOC fee is just not accurate. And of course, the people who rent their homes or live in non-HOA communities aren't forced to subsidize those when we use a fee-based system. And if we use general to pay for these services, then we may eventually even be forced to raise taxes. Even though we have 90 to 100 HOAs and condo boards, we've only really heard from a small handful of boards that have organized opposition. The vast majority of boards have remained silent even after our staff reached out to them. That tells me that this is not a major concern of most boards, and I continue to believe that most, if not all, boards will actually see a net benefit from the services offered by the CCOC. If it's the will of the council to table this vote or delay, I'd rather keep this issue alive than simply kill it. But tabling this matter for further study is not necessary. It has been studied and debated thoroughly multiple times over the last several years with plenty of public input. Tabling this matter will only result in unnecessarily delaying and denying access to these services for homeowners and boards alike, as will insisting on the creation of a new city commission from scratch. Without the CCOC, Gaithersburg's HOA boards and HOA members are subject to significant additional burdens and expense to resolve disputes exclusively through lawyers and courts. And there is the unfortunate risk of abuse by those HOAs that don't play by the rules. Without the CCOC, many board members and residents won't have access to the experts and resource materials to consult. And without the CCOC, the city has no ability to regulate HOAs to ensure proper operations, and no legal authority to resolve disputes. For those HOAs that operate well, I believe the CCOC will not have any serious negative impact on your operations, and in fact will be an added resource. For our rental properties, landlords and tenants already have access to these sorts of services through local government staff and a local commission with authority to resolve disputes. But for over 14,000 homeowners in Gaithersburg, there is no such access and no such services. As a matter of fairness, of good governance, consumer protection, of assistance during challenging times for a relatively low cost, assistance that benefits both boards and members for a cost that should be more than offset by the resulting savings, Gaithersburg should join the CCOC. Thanks to my colleagues for your patience.
Thank you, Ryan. So I'm going to say a few words, and it's not going to be nearly as long or exhaustive as what Ryan just did, but he put it all out on the table. So first off, I'm going to just share my personal experience, and obviously, as people who watch this body know, I don't have a vote on this. So I'm just going to say my piece, and there we go. I served on my HOA board. I'm living in a community called Orchard Place, and at the time, from 2003 to 2007, I was on the board. We were at the time a self-run HOA. We did not have a management company. We were doing everything ourselves. And we've since gone to a management company and made things a little bit easier on the current board. But I want to start off by saying to all the HOA board members who have weighed in on this or who are currently watching this, I have a high regard for what you do. It is, sometimes people say mayor and council is a thankless job. Not really. We get thanked every now and then. HOA is a thankless job. It is. It is a very, very difficult position to be in. And so I have a high regard for what you guys do. Now, I could say from that 4 years of experience on my board, we certainly could have used the training. Some of us invested more of our own time in learning about the role and the responsibility and the legal parameters of what HOAs do more than others. And it would be nice to sort of standardize that. I think that would have a positive impact on all the HOAs in the community. Also, I remember a situation in which we had one of our homeowners had built this big shed in their backyard. It was sort of the same size as some sheds that were in neighboring properties, but the HOA board came down on them and said, "No, you got to take it down. It doesn't comply with the standard, whatever the rules and regulations." And he appealed it and said, well, you know, neighbors have the same size shed, and the HOA board came back and said, well, those were grandfathered in, yours are not, yours is not. And you know, this wasn't a guy, he spent a lot of money on this thing. He's not a guy of great means. It certainly would have helped him to have the availability of the CCOC to go to and have some arbitration on the matter. He didn't have the money to go to court. He ended up taking down the shed and just having a lot of bad thoughts for the rest of time against the HOA. So that's kind of a tale I think is not unique to our community. I think that happened. That sort of thing does happen. Our HOA also had to contract with an attorney, you know, and we didn't have a lot of money, a lot of budget to do it, but you know, it would have been helpful to us to have this other binding arbitration, body of binding arbitration we could have relied on too. So I see it from the side of the homeowner of sort of limited means, and I see it from the perspective of the HOA board member. I think there's generally positive that could come out of this. So I am in support, and I, you know, when I look at I understand the $5 a year, but you know, 42 cents a month per, it's not even per person, it's per unit, for one household in an HOA, it's 42 cents a month for this thing. I agree. And you know, as far as looking at it as a form of insurance, to me, it makes sense. So if I were voting on this, I would support it. Who wants to go next? We'll go to Mike.
Thank you, Judd. And thank you, Ryan, for the very thorough and comprehensive explanation and justification for your efforts in this area. I completely agree. You were so comprehensive that I really have little to add. I would just emphasize that I'm in total agreement of the benefits of this as opposed to the detriments of it. I think it does level the playing field for basically a shareholder within a community who is a resident, a homeowner within a common ownership community, is a shareholder in that community. And it levels the playing field between them and the board if that needs to be done. It certainly does allow individual homeowners who are not of means and not able to afford an attorney if they needed to go to court. It affords them an opportunity for their dispute to be discussed and dealt with and perhaps arbitrated to an outcome that would be a win-win for both the HOA and the homeowner. The idea that we might set up our own commission in parallel to the landlord and tenant commission, I think we would also need to set up a fee structure for that, so that it's the HOA communities that pay for that service rather than the general fund and non-HOA community homeowners paying for that fund. So, given the elements that we need to make sure are part of such a commission, I expected that fee would be substantially greater than the fee that we would pay, that homeowners would pay now if the city opts into the CCOC. So those are just a couple of issues that I'll raise. I think it's obvious that out of all of the members on the council right now and the mayor, I'm the only person that currently lives in a non-HOA community. I've never had to deal with these things from that respect, either in terms of the opportunity to serve on an HOA board or to have a problem with the HOA board as a homeowner. Nonetheless, I'm certainly aware of cases and abuses both by homeowners within a common ownership community and the board in a common ownership community. So some of those things are completely unfair and unjustified, and some of those disputes probably could have been resolved very easily. But in some ways, the vociferous resistance to this from board members throughout, from associations in the city that have spoken up reminds me of the issue of voter suppression. If it wasn't so important, why would organizations want to prevent you from voting if there wasn't some value there? So in a way, that these are the kind of disputes that need to have a level playing field, and perhaps actually incents the idea, creates an incentive for more transparent and transparent negotiation between when a dispute arises between a homeowner or homeowners and the board that is supposed to represent all of the owners in a community. So I'm still in support. I'm still in support of this, and I agree that I don't think we need to do the research anymore, but I don't want this to die. I would agree to a trial period of 2 or 3 years. And I would, if there was a hardship in terms of the cost of entry into the CCOC for certain HOA and condo association communities, then I think that is something that we might consider down the line to offer assistance so that we could get this started. So that's where I am. Thank you again, Ryan, for the very thorough case you made in support of this.
Thank you, Mike. Who'd like to go next? I'm not seeing any hands, and I don't even see Neil Harris on my screen. Now I see Neil. Neil, go ahead.
I'm still just trying to get over being numb after the incredibly long presentation by my colleague. I thought it was very repetitive of things that we had discussed at previous meetings, and really that shown that maybe the city needs to hire an editor for these sorts of things. And I'm trying not to be mean, but I thought that was really out of control. So I just wanted to put that out there. Look, this discussion and the next discussion, I'm going to come from a philosophical underpinning of the same place, which is home rule. Okay, the reason we adopted that we agreed to opt into the county's pesticide regulation was because we had no choice. We were either going to opt in or not have a pesticide regulation, because we don't have the ability to regulate that. The county does and we don't. It's not part of our charter from the state. But in this case, and in an ethics case, we are chartered to develop our own regulations. So looking at the cost benefit is where I really have a core issue with the CCOC, in terms of not the individual cost per unit, but with the large number of units that we have in the city. The city is 50% common ownership communities compared to the county's 30%. $5 a unit doesn't seem like a lot, but $70,000 a year for the projected caseload comes out to many dollars, probably thousands of dollars per case that would be adjudicated by the CCOC on behalf of the citizens of Gaithersburg. Looking at the cost structure of the CCOC over the years, the costs have gone up, and yes, the costs had to be approved by the county council in open meetings, but there has been a trend of pretty significant increases as the CCOC has requested and been given more staff going forward. I think that $70,000 for this service is a lot, and that we could do better, and that $70,000 is likely to be a much larger number going forward. And again, my perspective comes from having been an officer and a board member of a very large HOA with 2,200 households that has had very few disputes, if any, that I can think of over the years that I was involved that would have likely gone to arbitration. In particular, because most of the people my perspective as a board member was, the issues were, there have been no complaints that I can recall in the last 15 years that I've been active in the HOA and in this community that where people felt the board was out of line. It was really more on the other side. And when you have people who are attorneys living in the community, they have the opposite unfair advantage. And, you know, Ryan, all your discussion about who pays for what, I mean, even if you go to the CCOC and you're paying for your case, the board is still the HOA is still paying for their side of the argument out of your dues. So I'm not sure where that even makes any sense. But regardless, from a cost benefit point of view, it doesn't seem like it makes sense. And this all has come down to a small handful of condo and HOA boards that have had issues, and a large number of larger communities that have more professional management that don't really have any ongoing issues. It just doesn't seem fair to tax a large number of households when there should be a better mechanism for getting a small number of community boards under control. I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Rob, Lorianne, who'd like Rob, was that, I couldn't tell if that's a hand raise, what was happening there. Go ahead, Rob.
I mean, you could call it a hand raise or you could call it making tea, one or the other. I was going to take a sip real quick.
Well, you just made some tea and volunteered yourself to go now.
Yeah,
So.
no, that's fine. I don't know if Lorianne wanted to chime in before I get on my soapbox, though. But let's give her a chance. That's a caveat emptor right there.
Lorianne, raise your hand if you want to go now, or you want to wait till after, or don't raise your hand if you want to wait till after Rob. All right, she's not raising her hand. Rob, go ahead.
I promise this will not be as long as what Ryan said, but Ryan was very articulate. He made many good points, but I will also agree with Neil that it was perhaps a little long. Substantively, I'm kind of, agreeing with some of what Ryan says and sort of agreeing with some of what Neil says. And Ryan kind of had the benefit of us having lengthy discussions on this and him being able to foreshadow some of the concerns that I've raised. And, I mentioned that not only because it gave Ryan the opportunity to kind of raise some issues, but also that to recognize the fact that he really has been a champion and a leader on this issue and has been, even behind the scenes, has been very articulate in making his case and making the case for the CCOC. And one of the things he's quick to remind me of is the fact that the benefits of quasi-judicial forums and the fact that I was a quasi-judicial hearing officer at GAO for many years and the benefits that the GAO provides to, in our case, our common practice of federal procurement law. So I do recognize the benefits of a quasi-judicial forum, and I do recognize the benefits that the CCOC provides, and that's been articulated quite eloquently, both by the membership of the CCOC in the county, as well as our staff, and Ryan reiterated a lot of those points. But where I kind of sit right now is I'm not in a place to close the door on the CCOC, because again, I believe that a quasi-judicial body has benefit, and it's something that has examples here in the city across the spectrum. You know, we've got the Animal Control Board, we've got the Commission on Landlord-Tenant Affairs. So the thought or the sentiment that this is just another layer of bureaucracy, well, you know, that's one way of looking at it, but it's also these boards, commissions, these quasi-judicial entities that we have here in the city provide a service to people that need to be heard, that can't necessarily, you know, afford to go to court. And I won't reiterate Ryan's eloquent points on that. Where I think that I am not yet ready to, while I'm not yet ready to close the door on the CCOC, I am not yet ready to support opting into the county's law and adopting the CCOC at this point. And the reason for that is because I'm kind of in a place where the alternatives, at least in my view, have not been fleshed out. We have not really discussed, as Neil had talked about, the cost benefits of home rule and the benefits of a city-run board. I do agree with staff's recommendation wholeheartedly that expansion of the Landlord and Tenant Commission, or the Commission on Landlord Tenant Affairs, is not the appropriate quasi-judicial body to be hearing CCOC, HOC, or HOA type issues. But I also think that we have not explored, other than tangentially, the prospect of a forming our own commission here in the city, as we have with other matters. And the most closely akin, at least in my mind, is that the Commission on Landlord Tenant Affairs, where we have opted out of the county's ordinance on landlord tenant issues, and we've set up our own home rule, as Neil puts it, a quasi-judicial body to govern in that area of law and other areas of law as well. And so I think that has not been explored enough. What I also think needs to be explored is, in Kevin has been very helpful in kind of explaining to me the history of a lot of what the city has done and when we made the decisions. And so with the Commission on Landlord Tenant Affairs, I mean, the county adopted its ordinance at its commission. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, I think you said in the 70s, early 80s, and we soon followed and decided at that time to opt out and set up our own commission. I don't have the complete historicals on that. Obviously, I wasn't around at the time or in the city of Gaithersburg, but that's important to me. I know Ryan had articulated that these are two separate bodies and they can be treated differently. Well, I see them as linked. And I see a decision on home rule on one consumer protection initiative, the quasi-judicial forum, the Commission on Landlord Tenant Affairs, and at that time, a non-decision on CCOC. So the county set up the CCOC and we never opted in, we never opted out, we never set up our own commission. The CCOC issue has been raised off and on throughout the years, but to my knowledge, it has never been raised in the through the view of, well, how does this relate to our decision on the Commission on Landlord Tenant Affairs on this closely akin issue, at least in my mind. And so what I would like to see is, I'm suggesting perhaps, Mr. Mayor, a work session in the near future to discuss the genesis of the Commission on Landlord Tenant Affairs, its makeup, its cost, its fee structures, how those expenses are accounted for, what those expenses are. I understand it's paid for out of the operating budget. So as opposed to the proposal for the CCOC, which would be a fee-based structure, our Commission on Landlord Tenant Affairs is paid out of the operating budget. It's not paid out of a fee structure, for example, assessed on landlords or tenants or their affairs. I understand the county does it the same way, and I don't understand why that is the case, that there is this disparate treatment between the two. I think that could inform what the cost structure would be for let's call it an HOA commission here in the city, if we were to stand it up, as kind of Neil was talking about his home rule. I don't have the information to have that cost benefit analysis that Neil performed because I don't know what the costs are. And we haven't had that discussion. We haven't had that policy debate. We haven't had the policy debate of the interplay between the landlord tenant issues and the HOA issues. So what I'm proposing is that we set up a work session, but I don't want the CCOC issue to die because it may be the appropriate vessel for meeting this need. And so what I propose, if there is support, is to reopen the record. And I know Ryan had said had discussed possibly even amending the ordinance such that it wouldn't go effect until July. So I kind of see a little bit of runway in that area where we could have this discussion. We could have the full policy debate on the various permutations in this area of city governance. And we could then close the record on the CCOC, and then a decision could be made at that point in time to meet the budgetary decisions that the HOAs will have to make this summer. So that's where I am, and that's what I propose.
Okay, we'll see if we come back to that proposal. Lorianne, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you to my colleagues for all of the comments that have been shared thus far. You know, I've spoken with Ryan about his position and his ongoing efforts to include the city in opting into the Common Ownership Commission. I made these comments before about the cost benefit analysis and what our residents are really going to be getting out of this opting into this entity. I served on my HOA board, my condo association board. I've had complaints that have been resolved with the condo association, and recently was just informed that we're getting a new property management company. And so these are things that happen with democratically elected bodies. We elect our HOA board of directors. They make decisions. If we do have issues, we have our property managers intervene. I agree that the CCOC provides an abundance of resources and trainings that we've used and that many condos and HOAs have used to equip themselves with the experience necessary to discuss these sorts of issues within their communities. And so, you know, I reached out to Kevin and asked him about what would it cost to opt in, to not opt in, but to expand the responsibilities of the Landlord-Tenant Commission. And we had some initial numbers that we definitely could benefit from seeing more of. More details about how those numbers would break down. And I think my colleagues have expressed their concerns about what those costs would be. When I think about what we're actually forcing our residents to do, residents who may not even take advantage of this service, I cannot agree that there is necessarily a benefit to this service. When you live in a condo or HOA, you're already paying an expense for these sorts of protections. And, you know, our board is empowered to mediate issues between landlord and tenant, between the community and the condo board if there's an issue, if the window isn't correct, or any additions that are made to the property. And so I feel like condos and HOAs are already equipped with these responsibilities, and these resources are free. I do know that the current $5 fee is being waived because of the pandemic. I don't know how long that will be, but I too would be supportive of a trial run. I know we just released our community survey, and it would have been nice to have a question about this in the survey to solicit some more feedback from some of our residents who may not be aware that this is being considered currently. And so while I want to support our residents who, you know, have issues within their communities. As homeowners, these are the responsibilities that we take on. And we hope that we have enough protection to prevent us from going to court to arbitrate a costly disagreement between two parties. And so I don't want this to go away necessarily, but I would be supportive of, you know, a pilot of, you know, while we are in the pandemic, if people are really supportive of us opting in, I wouldn't be opposed to us opting in for the year while there is no fee being assessed. However, I don't see a need to force our residents to do this unless we have a more significant outpouring of support for this. Seeing, I believe Kevin mentioned about 30 respondents who were, can you repeat the numbers, Kevin? The breakdown.
Or again, this was just from the submissions after the public hearing.
Yeah.
We had 38 responses that were against opting in, and then 43 that were in favor.
Okay. And so, you know, these are representatives of less than 10 of our communities. And I mean, we have at least 10% who turn out to vote in elections. And I would think that something of this significance, that we're opting the entire HOA and condo associations into, we'd have a more significant showing of support for this. So at this time, I don't agree with opting in, but I wouldn't be opposed to a pilot of over the next year, since we're in the pandemic, if the fees are going to be waived for the entire year, just to see how much demand comes from the city of Gaithersburg, to see, while we are discussing this further, to see if this is something that we want to impose permanently. So that's all I have for now.
Thanks, Lorianne. So this question's for Mark. If Gaithersburg were to craft our opt-in so that it was 1 year, is it true? Would it be an option to have it without a fee that would apply to this first year?
No, I'm sorry, we would not waive the fees. Currently, because of the COVID pandemic, we are not collecting fees for either the COC program or for our rental program, the landlord tenant program. However, those fees would be due 60 days after the pandemic ends and the Maryland state emergency is lifted. So if you were to opt in tomorrow, it's $5 per unit. I did just, not that my opinion matters on this, but I did like Kevin's suggestion to start July 1. It gives plenty of runway, and we would be able to get all of the association information in, and we don't prorate fees. So it's not like if you joined today that we would be charging $2.50. It would be still $5 per unit. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. So what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, council members, but I see two that are in favor, one that's opposed, and two that don't, that need further study. They want to keep it alive and study this issue further. That by nods of heads or shakes of heads, does that seem about right to everybody? Okay, you guys are not that demonstrative that you're nodding here.
Mr. Mayor, can I just, I'm not quite sure if that's 100% right. I kind of want to better understand Councilmember Sales' suggestion about a pilot project, which I'm very interested in. but it sounded to me, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Lorianne, that you would only support that if there was a guarantee of no fee. And it sounded that that's not something that the county folks can absolutely guarantee, although we are certainly in the state of emergency. They're not collecting the fee, but they can't waive the fee, and it would have to be collected at some point. So if you're still interested in coming up with some kind of pilot or something a little different than that or not. So I guess maybe we can have a discussion about better understanding exactly where Rob and Lorianne are.
Well, I think Tim cleared that up. I was under the impression that the fee would be waived completely during the pandemic. I didn't know that they were going to be collecting the fee 60 days after the pandemic orders are lifted, the restrictions are lifted. So I don't mind studying it. I still don't see the need for us to opt in. I don't think that we had enough outpouring of support in favor of us opting in. And based on the numbers, I would have expected a lot more people to support this. We have hundreds of HOAs and condo associations in the city. I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm sure, Kevin, you're more familiar with how many communities we have across the city that would fall into this. Any
or so?
I think it's 90.
It's just over 90. And again, but you know, the total number is there's about 14,000 dwelling units that make up those homes in those common ownership communities. But there is about 90 plus actual associations, being a condo and homeowners associations.
And we heard from less than 10.
And basically 0.5% of residents who live in common ownership communities.
Yeah, just about a dozen.
Okay. Okay.
I'm a little
Similar to
confused.
the number that we hear about on any issue. That
Yeah, I'm a little confused about the suggestion that we need to hear it from
maybe
thousands.
we should stop making decisions because we only hear from less than 10% of the community.
Less than 10% of the community votes in our elections.
Right.
So
We're not imposing a tax when we're voting. And this is basically an extra fee that we're imposing. So I would hope that our residents would have more of a say if we're going to have an increase or impose another fee on top of what they're already paying to their HOAs and their condo associations.
Rob, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, I was just, because Ryan had asked for clarification on my position. You know, as you'll recall from the last meeting, I was the one that threw out the sunset provision as a possible alternative to be considered in if we were to consider opting in. So at the end of the day, after where I think we need to have more of a deliberative process on the various alternatives, that would be something I'd probably favorably consider. If the decision is that a home rule commission is not something that we want to look at, or no commission at all. If the decision of the body is CCOC, then I would look favorably on that. But I'm just not there yet because of, as I described before.
Okay, Mike, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, I don't look, the idea of home rule is certainly worth exploring, but I'm pretty confident that the cost is going to be 2 or 3 times what it would cost to opt into the CCOC, to an existing structure and bureaucracy that's already present. If we did that ourselves. Remember that the purpose of doing that is that then we would require every community, HOA and condo community within the city, to be part of that whole operation. It wouldn't be by choice. Everyone would opt in, just as it would be for everyone would be opted in, just as it would be if we went with the CCOC. So, you know, sure, we ought to get we ought to do the research and find out how much it would cost to provide that service, and then we have to figure out a fee structure to do that.
Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. And so I'm interested in looking at that. And I'll throw this out there for Kevin's edification in the path forward is one of the things that I am interested in, again, is this possibility of a divergence between landlord-tenant issues being enforced under our code and HOA issues being enforced under the county's code with an opt-in. And so if the CCOC, if we're going to opt into the HOA, the county's HOA ordinances, then one thing I would be interested in is that disconnect being resolved and possibly dissolving the Commission on Landlord-Tenant Affairs and opting in to the county's ordinance. I don't know if that's feasible or possible, but that's part of that issue of I don't have enough information.
Ryan.
So, Mr. Mayor, I think in looking at the Venn diagram and trying to figure out where there are 3 votes overlapping forward with something, that it sounds like Council Vice President Sesma, Councilmember Wu, and I would agree to, I don't know if it's appropriate, whatever the term is, table the policy discussion or reopen the record, however, Rob, you think we ought to structure it for additional time, research these issues and get back to us with some of these answers to present at a future time, and maybe have a discussion in the spring to see if we could get a final vote one way or the other. Does that capture kind of what you're getting at?
I mean, I articulated my path forward, and while I am a lawyer, there is only one lawyer I look to on these procedural and process issues that applies to the city. And so I'd ask Lynn what procedure would get us to where I just articulated.
I think Ryan is correct. If that is the path that we do want to take, we would need to table the decision or the discussion this evening and then reopen the record. We would probably do it for an indefinite period of time at this point, unless, and again, I would look to Tanisha, unless you have Tanisha and Kevin, as to whether you have a time frame when staff could get the information together and we could schedule a work session or other presentation to bring back to the council.
Just a clarification, Lynn, do we need to reopen the record, or is this additional research that we're going to do at the staff level in support of the policy discussion, and therefore we wouldn't need additional record to be open?
I mean, that would be a decision that the council would need to make. If the sole purpose is to get additional information from staff, we would not need to reopen the record. But if you wanted to provide the opportunity for the public to have input or comment on that information, then we would need to reopen the record.
All right, so Mike, we'll go to Mike.
Yeah, so, one of the issues we did not discuss with the public to any extent was the idea of basically this home rule idea in our own and the city's own commission. And for that reason, we may want to gather public opinion on that particular option. The resistance to the CCOC, it sounds as if there would be a similar resistance to an opt-in even to our own commission, but that's just, gauging what we've heard already. So, so I would argue that if we table this, and I will move to table it, that that we reopen the record, and then in tabling this, I think we also need to describe what it is, the purpose in going forward with directing staff for more research.
Thanks, Mike. Lorianne.
Thank you, Mayor. So I know Ryan mentioned during his remarks, this is like a consumer protection sort of insurance policy. And I know that the county Office of Consumer Protection actually offers free mediation services. I'm not sure to what extent or to for what parties, but if we can also get some more information about mediation resources that are offered in similar instances, that would be helpful. So I just wanted to add that if we're going to be exploring additional resources.
Since Tim is here from the county, I don't want to put you on the spot because we can certainly go after this information for Lorianne, but if you wanted to address how the Office of Consumer Protection would interface with a CCOC type of issue that was brought to it, tell us.
I don't know that OCP really does any kind of mediation in these home ownership type of affairs. The CCOC used to be housed in the Office of Consumer Protection. However, the council shifted it to us in, I believe, FY17. Mark, is that right? So they brought it to us. We got more resources. We built all the systems, more staffing, built in all the different educational, trainings and whatnot. So we do it. So OCP doesn't do it, but we do it.
They do all their mediation for anything other than common ownership. We have all our mediations in-house now. If they get one for common ownership, they kick it to us and we handle it. And then it would fall under, if they're in the common ownership community that we regulate, then we would do it. If not, we would have to opt out of it.
Thank you both. Tanisha, please.
So I just, still wrapping my head around how we handle things. So the opening of the record, if the goal is to get response on the additional research that the staff will do, then it seems like we may need to wait to reopen the record until we have that information so that people will have something to react to. I'm not exactly sure at this point how long we'd need. We kind of, the term spring was thrown out there, and we are in the middle, or we're at the beginning of the budget process, I should say. So we'll be pretty focused there for a bit. So spring also includes April. I'm thinking maybe April could be a good opportunity for us to drill down and ask more specific questions to build out what it would cost the city to duplicate these services for our residents. I thought Councilman Sesma brought up an interesting point that, the objections that we've received so far to opting into COCC, they didn't seem to be, we don't want COCC because it's the county. It was, we don't want COCC because of these things, which would likely still apply to a city-run organization. But at least if we are able to compile some information and bring it back, then we could determine, we could reopen the record at that time so that the community is actually reacting to something new, some new information. Otherwise, I'm trying to understand why we reopen the record now.
Thank you, Tanisha. Rob.
Just thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what Tanisha just said. And I've heard the comment before about the city looking to duplicate the services of the CCOC, and I just wanted to state, at least in my mind, it's not necessarily a question of duplicating the CCOC in the city, but passing appropriate ordinances within the city, tailored to the city, and then enforcing those ordinances through whatever the body may be, tailored to the city. And so, does the board offer, let's call it the HOA, the Gaithersburg HOA Commission, does it offer training? Does it offer, an online docketing system? Does it offer, any given aspect of the CCOC. I'm not necessarily looking to replicate that here in the city, but to propose something and consider something that is appropriately tailored to our circumstances here. And I'm sorry, Mike, I'm sorry, just to finish that point.
Finish
In that regard, I'm not necessarily looking for just more information, but I'm looking for more deliberation on the direction to take this as a deliberative body within our fair borders. And finally, I agree with Mike that if we are taking that kind of deliberative process on these alternatives, that public input, I think, would be important, because it's not, in my mind, looking at this, we would be expanding the scope of what we would be looking at, and whatever it is we're looking at would impact our residents, and therefore the input from our residents would be important in at least me making a decision on this.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go Mike and then Tanisha.
No, Tanisha made a good point. We need the public needs to be able to respond to something. We don't have that yet, other than what we've already talked about. I think in terms of saying we want to design a system that's for the city, we still have to have a template. And I think the template that exists is the CCOC. Once we have those elements, then we can decide which, if we were going to do our own, which we would select. But we still need to basically work with a template to gather the data, and then we can decide what best fits the city. I'm not saying that that's something that I'm going to support, but I think if that's how we continue this discussion, then we need the research to know what this is going to cost us, and then we need the input from the community on this particular, on an option for home rule versus opting into an existing structure.
Thanks, Mike. Tanisha.
I'm glad Mike went first, because I was essentially going to make the same comment that in order for us to not chase our tails through this process and hopefully try to, utilize our staff time as effectively as possible to bring you back something that you can react to, we really need to start with that template. Otherwise, I think, what I might have heard Rob describe was sort of this build from scratch, right? We need to decide what we want here and what we don't want here. So we starting from the COCC's template at least allows us to cost that out. And then we can make determinations of, do you want all of that or none of that? But that will take some effort.
Lynn and then Rob.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to remind you that Mike did make a motion to table, which there has not been a second to. And you could do these as separate actions to table and then separately discuss whether you want to reopen the record at this point in time.
That is an excellent suggestion. I saw Rob's hand first, and then we'll go to Ryan. Go ahead, Rob.
So first point, second, Mike's motion. Second point, separate from the second, is, sometimes I don't articulate things very well, and Mike often has to step in and kind of enunciate what I in fact meant. And so, my point wasn't to not consider what the CCOC does at all. And we do need a starting place, but as this process moves on, I'm not necessarily convinced that we have to replicate everything with the CCOC, but that's a discussion for a later date. And at some point, I think public input is important. Whether we reopen the record now or reopen it at a later date after, for example, the work session occurs, if a work session occurs, I don't know.
Okay. Well, I mean, if we do just make a motion to table it for now, we could defer that decision for a little bit until we till staff sort of comes up with a path forward. Okay, Ryan and then Neil. Ryan, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I was just going to second the motion from Council Vice President Sesma, which has already been seconded.
Okay, Neil.
I was also going to second his motion.
Okay, well then, I guess it's time for a vote. I will call the roll. All those in favor of tabling this item for now, say aye. Any opposed, say nay. Councilmember Sesma,
Aye.
Councilmember Spiegel,
Aye.
Councilmember Wu.
Aye, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to add to Mark and Tim, thank you for all the time and attention you put to this issue, and please have patience.
All right, Councilmember Sales
Aye.
and Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Okay, it is tabled. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your patience. It has taken a while, and I'm sure we'll see you back. So next item on our agenda is policy discussion on the ethics ordinance, and I'm going to turn it over to Lynn Board to lead us in this discussion.
Thank you. Tonight you have before you policy discussion on revisions to the city's ethics ordinance, which is Chapter 7A of the City Code. This ordinance was introduced on November 2nd, 2020. The public hearing was duly advertised and held on December 7th of 2020. There were no public comments at the public hearing or submitted for the record. The proposed amendments that are before you this evening would bring the city's ethics ordinance into compliance with the State Ethics Commission's model ordinance. The revisions to this ordinance also make some revisions that would bring the ordinance into compliance with some more recent state statutory changes to the ethics dealing with lobbyist disclosures, enforcement provisions, and public access to financial disclosure requirements. And the city's Ethics Commission did review the amendments to the ordinance, and they have recommended approval of the ordinance that is included in your packet as option A. I will note that there are two optional ordinances in your packet, option A and option B. The option A is the fully compliant ordinance with the state's model ordinance. The option B, we've kept 3 areas of this ordinance consistent with the current language in the ordinance, and it has been modified to make these provisions relevant to prevention of conflicts of interest in Gaithersburg, which is allowed by Section 5808 of the Maryland Public Ethics Law. The option B has highlighted those particular areas so you can try to make it a little bit easier for you to see where the differences were between the option A and the option B. And those differences are particularly under the financial disclosure provisions for elected officials in the areas of interest in real property, interest in business entities, and employment or sources of income of immediate family members of elected officials. So the ordinance is ready for your consideration this evening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Lynn. I will start off here just by saying, as everyone will recall, I've had a lot to say on this issue for a number of years, and in particular, I made a long speech on this at the December 7th public hearing, and I'm not going to rehash all that, which I'm sure is a relief to everyone. I'll just reiterate a couple of points. For an ethics code to be effective, it needs to be understandable. It needs to be relevant to the types of conflicts of interest it's trying to address. And it needs to strike the right balance between getting the public all the information it needs in order to detect and deter unethical behavior and preserve as much of the right of privacy for public officials as is reasonably possible. The closer you get to achieving those criteria, the better the public is served. The state is demanding that we apply their one-size-fits-all language to our ordinance here in Gaithersburg. As I've said many times, while the vast majority of what the state's trying to do here is fine, there is some degree of overreach in it, and in our case, I believe would work against the public interest. The state law gives the State Ethics Commission, which is the body charged with overseeing local ethics laws, the latitude to consider local circumstances. However, they've chosen to be inflexible on this, and I believe they're wrong, and that's a position we've taken as a city in the past. In fact, I don't think anybody here would dispute those facts. So at the public hearing, I asked staff to draft this version B of the ordinance. that would largely mirror the first, but include what I call a relevance threshold for disclosure of real estate, business ownership, and family employment. So in version B, the official would have to report, for example, if they have an ownership stake in Novavax, because the city interacts with Novavax on planning and zoning. However, if the official has an ownership stake in Apple, they wouldn't have to report that, because why would that even be relevant? A disclosure like that might make sense at the state level, and it does make sense at the state level, because at the General Assembly level, they have regulatory authority over a much wider scope of businesses, but we don't. And that would simply be an unnecessary invasion of privacy. As I said before, the easy way forward here is to just suck it up, pass the amended ordinances as drafted, which would be version A, and put the matter behind us. And I get that, but I don't think it's the right way forward. I think that State Ethics Commission is wrong here, and I think we should go with version B, stick to our guns on relevant disclosure requirements. There has been some turnover in the State Ethics Commission, as Lynn has told me, and it's possible that the new members will be more amenable to doing what they're legally supposed to be doing and considering local circumstances. I think this is an issue worth taking a stand on, and I think version B would be an ethics code that would more effectively serve the public interest. And I see Mike's hand up. I'll go with Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm in complete agreement, as I have been for a long time on this particular issue. I think we've seen, and I believe most of the council has felt the same way. We have been governed for as long as I've been a council member, and before that, an ethics ordinance in which there has been full compliance by all elected members and all other members who are obligated to comply with our ordinance. I think the intransigence of the State Ethics Commission is odd and strange because the language does allow us some flexibility to adapt to local circumstances, Lynn has pointed out. And so I will move that, which is what option B of the ordinance allows us to do. And so I will move option B for adoption.
All right. We have a motion, and if anybody wants a second, that's fine. If anybody wants to wants to go through policy discussion, that's fine too. Just raise your hand.
Needs a second.
Rob Wu.
So I kind of wanted to move into policy discussion just real briefly, and it's more of a Lynn question. And so, well, I'll preface that with Judd, I respect your opinions and your articulate views on this issue. And I don't have much quarrel with it. The concern I've got, this is the lawyer in me, is what are the risks between option A and which is the fully compliant one, and option B, which is the tailored one?
I did, since we held the public hearing, I did have the opportunity to have a discussion with the executive director of the State Ethics Commission to just kind of get a feel for whether they may be a little bit more flexible on this issue than they were in the past. And the kind of resounding answer that I received was no, that they would expect all jurisdictions to have what they consider a fully compliant ordinance. There are penalties based in the state law that the State Ethics Commission could take the city to court to have the court enforce the state's model ordinance upon the city. There would be no monetary penalties or anything like that, but they could go into court and require us to, or have the court impose the compliant ordinance on the city. I do think from a litigation strategy, that would certainly give us the opportunity to go to the court and make our arguments as to why we think that our ordinance isn't compliant, particularly with that section 5808 of the Maryland Public Ethics Law that allows some flexibility to local jurisdictions. But that would be the ultimate enforcement authority by the State Ethics Commission. They have had the ability to do that for a number of years now, and they have not chosen to take that action against any local government.
Thanks, Lynn. Thanks, Rob. Did you have any more, or should we go to someone
Yeah,
else?
that was the only policy discussion question I really had, and I'll reserve any voting for after policy discussion has concluded.
Okay, Lori Ann, go right ahead.
Yes, so I too had a quick question as well. How many of our municipalities in the county have opted into this state ethics?
How many in Montgomery County or statewide?
In Montgomery County.
My understanding is all of the municipalities in Montgomery County, with the exception of Gaithersburg, do have an ordinance that the State Ethics Commission considers as a fully compliant ordinance.
Okay. Is that the same across the state, or does it vary?
No. There are several municipalities, actually 3 total, that do not have compliant ordinances in the state, Maryland.
And are they similar in size?
They are Hampstead, Mount Airy, and Gaithersburg.
Oh.
And Lynn, correct me if I'm wrong, but I recall you stating in the last session that the state level commission would review our ordinance, but they would only review our ordinance after we pass the ordinance. There's no pre-passage kind of review.
They will do what they call a courtesy review. So if you send it to them before you pass it, they will take a look at it and give you an opinion. But then after you pass it, you still have to send it back to them again for a formal decision from the commission.
Neil.
So it's my understanding, since we've been discussing this for probably longer than I've been on the council, but from what I remember, sometime in the last several years, the state, at the request of the Ethics Commission, actually increased the requirements under the law to state, not just to state that we were in compliance with the law, but with adjustments for local needs, but that in fact we had to be in complete compliance with all regulations in it, and we're allowed to have additional factors as well. Shall be equivalent to or exceed the requirements of subtitle 5 is the new language. So is that not the case, Lynn?
That language is in the Maryland Public Ethics Law, but there is still also the provision in section 5808 that does allow local amendments to ensure that you are appropriately addressing conflicts of interest in the local jurisdiction.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I mean, basically, I don't have super strong feelings on this subject. I wish it would go away, honestly, but again, with the coming from a core of home rule, it seems like overreach on the part of the state to impose requirements that may be appropriate at a much larger organizational level on a municipality of our size, where we have very little spending authority and very little likelihood that, or I mean, vanishingly small likelihood that we would be lobbied at all, let alone on an issue that would require conflict of interest regulations to be enforced. So I understand that some members feel very strongly about certain aspects of this, and the only reservation I have is I would hate to see us pulled into court at any kind of significant expense. So let me ask another question of Lynn, which is that should we adopt option B as has been moved? And should the State Ethics Commission decide to make an example of us and take us to court, what would likely be the cost to the city in actual dollars and time spent?
Certainly, as far as dollars, that would most likely be something that we would handle in-house without getting outside counsel involved. So it's really more of a time commitment. So, you know, I mean, I think it would, as any litigation does, take a significant amount of staff time in order to, you know, pursue that. So it would have an impact on the ability of my office to, you know, deal with other matters. If we were to get outside counsel involved, I anticipate the cost would probably be somewhere around $20,000 to $25,000.
But in general, you would expect that we would not likely need outside counsel, correct?
I think this would be one we would handle in-house.
Yeah, those lawyers can be expensive, Neil.
What do you charge, Ryan?
Let's not get into that. Rob, or Neil, were you done, Neil?
I'm done. Like I said, I don't have super strong feelings on this one. I think either way, we're fine. I think that the city and its elected officials have been behaving perfectly ethically, and the state needs to, you know, focus on more consequential issues.
Thank you. Rob, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And so I'm kind of where Neil is on this. And so, you know, as this issue has kind of raised itself over the years, it never quite came to a vote on ordinance, but we have had discussions on this. And my position was always, you know, I was filing ethics disclosures in my government job, which were publicly available. So I really didn't have a skin in the game because you could always just track that down. It's kind of not the case anymore because I'm working for a private company. But, you know, I'm kind of, as a policy matter, you know, we're not Baltimore. We're a small city. Debatably, I guess, we're one of the largest cities in Maryland, but that's not saying much. But we do have small city issues with, for example, filling positions, volunteer positions on commissions, committees, and boards that would be governed by these ethics statutes. And if my concern would be, you know, given that we have had issues in the past and continue to have issues with vacancies on such boards, committees, and commissions, you know, what impact would having onerous reporting requirements, disclosure requirements on prospective candidates have? And so, you know, I've looked at option B. I think it adequately protects the ethics considerations. And so that's kind of where I am. I did want to ask one question of Tanisha and Lynn, given that there was this question of, or assertion of staff time in defense or of any possible litigation. Is there a staff recommendation on option A or option B?
I wanted to just make one thing clear before I answer your question. The more substantial financial disclosure requirements are only applicable to elected officials.
Okay.
So members of our boards and commissions and staff only report, you know, much lesser. It's not very detailed at all what those commission members do have to report. So I don't think that alone would cause you know, potentially people to choose not to serve on commissions or committees. So I did want to kind of clarify that one point. As far as, you know, I guess I have a little bit of a conflict here because I do serve as the staff liaison for the Ethics Commission, and the Ethics Commission has made a recommendation for approval of option A. So I don't have a separate staff recommendation.
I think it'd be difficult for us to have a staff recommendation that's different from a state mandate, but that doesn't take away your ability or authority to make an alternative decision. But from a staff perspective, I don't think we could advise you in the opposite direction.
Ryan, did you want to say anything, or should we just go to, do we have a second? Did anybody second the? I'm looking for a hand. Mike has made a motion on option B. Do we have a second?
Rob was going there.
What?
I thought Rob was going there.
So what did I state before is when I have problems articulating myself, Mike always steps in and articulates the position that I wanted to. with the caveat that, I'm kind of on the fence on this issue. And then therefore, Judd, given your articulate and forceful, even vociferous advocacy for the second option, I'll second Mike's motion.
Okay, so we'll call the roll. This is on option B. All those in favor say aye, any opposed say nay. Councilmember Sesma.
Aye.
Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Spiegel.
I support option A, so I'm going to vote nay.
Councilmember Sales.
I am also going to vote nay as well.
Okay. All right. So option 2 carries 3-2 with council members Spiegel and Sales voting in opposition. Okay. Well, thank you all very much. Next, we have from the city attorney.
So I just have hopefully one rather quick item this evening. I did want to let the mayor and council know, going back to the FCC and all their orders. The commission's site expansion order went into effect today. This order deals with towers that are not in the public rights of way, so a little bit different than our small cell issues, but it prohibits local governments from exercising their zoning authority to deny applications to modify wireless towers or base stations that are not in the public right of way, provided that they do not substantially change the physical dimensions of the existing facility. So this order would apply to some of the towers we have, such as the one in Kelly Park. And those towers, we have a proposed one that AT&T is looking at. So it would impact those types of facilities that are not in the public way. It doesn't sound like a big change, but unfortunately the FCC has defined as a substantially change to mean that the facility can expand by 30 feet in any direction, which, particularly when you look at some of like the base station, and again, I'll use the one in Kelly Park as an example, if they were to expand that facility 30 feet in any direction, it could have a pretty significant impact. So the Smart Communities Coalition, again, which the city is a part of, did file a petition today for reconsideration of this order with the FCC, and in hopes that the change in the makeup of the commission after January 20th will have an impact on this order. So again, the FCC membership is based on political appointments with 3 members from the party of the president and 2 members from the other party. So we will see some changes in the FCC in the near future, and we're hoping for a little bit more favorable treatment from them going forward. And that's it from me this evening.
Thank you, Lane. And I heard from Dennis earlier that we don't have anything from other staff. So with that, I will remind everybody that we have a work session next week on January 11th to discuss the stormwater program fee reassessment. The next regular session of the Mayor and Council will be on Tuesday, January 19th, because there's a holiday on Monday. And until next time, let's do great things, Gaithersburg. We are adjourned.